All right. Well, thank you for that. And good to see you again, Allan. Thank you for agreeing to do this podcast. Can you just tell me a little bit about yourself? What is it that you're working on?
Right. Thanks very much for having me. My name is Allan. I'm CEO and founder of Marinas Bio. I've been working with animals, especially aquatic animals, for over a decade. For me, I live and work in hundreds of seafood facilities to gain hands-on experience from farming, processing, and selling fish to real customers. However, at work, I had to kill more than 1 million animals a day. And that's why I feel compelled to find a sustainable alternative. During my MBA, I was CFO for another alternative foods company, and I was able to help them to raise money. And then this time around, we work with what I feel is amazing founders to create something that is expensive, that is sustainable, and that makes science breakthrough to make this cultivated seafood industry works, in my view.
So when you say you want to work on something that's expensive, do you mean sort of inexpensive, or is it supposed to be expensive?
Well, let me put it this way. The cultivated process is expensive today, no matter which way you look at it. And we want to make a business case that is profitable today instead of profitable when we wish we get to 1 million tons a day or whatever it is, right? So the first product will always have to have a price that compensates for the cost of the research.
So you're working on cultivated caviar. So because that's at a premium, I suppose that ticks all the boxes in that regard, right?
We want to make seafood delicacies that the animal themselves are not efficient at making, and in that way we are conserving the animals, we are fighting climate actions, and we're also helping with the animal welfare.
So you're saying that the animals are not efficient at making it. I know about cows. The efficiency of a cow is only 4% compared to a bioreactor that is anything around sort of 15%. So in regard to caviar, is it a similar thing? What is the efficiency of the sturgeon? Is it sturgeon that the caviar comes from?
Yes, so primary caviar or sturgeon caviar comes from sturgeon. We also make other roles when it comes from salmon, trout, and other species.
Okay.
Just focus on sturgeon for a moment. It takes maybe 1, 2, 3 years to farm most farm animals, but for sturgeon it takes around 10 years. So in the fish tray or in the animal meat tray, we have something called feed conversion ratios, where like a cow or a pig is like 2 or 3. So that means every 2 pounds of feed turn into 1 pound of animal. In fish is probably 2 or 1 point something, depending on the fish. But in the case of sturgeon, it's not like that, because number one, it takes 10 years to farm a fish. And just imagine if you're a farmer and you're trying to run a business, you're feeding the fish for 10 years and the fish die right before they give you the caviar, then you basically lose all that money. So that's number one. Number two is only half of the sturgeon population are female. And of course, as you know, only female produce caviar. And number three is that it takes really long time, and the outcome is not always consistent. So we know farms that have been farming sturgeon and they haven't had output for the last 3 years because either the situation is not right, the age is not right, or the quality is not right, and they don't want to damage their reputation. So that a farm can have zero revenue for 3 years. And of course, like that's not the same. That's not the same for chicken or for fish, or like fish fillets, and then for other species. So we feel that we are actually making it more efficient, and it's not necessarily just how much energy or how many calories is converted from food to meat. I mean, of course, that's important too, but we're trying to make a business case that this is more efficient, because there is, of course, a lot of unknowns with bioreactors. As we don't know how efficient it can be at scale. We don't know like what is the practical experience of running giant bioreactors for food. Honestly, as a human race, we have not done that, and I of course hope that we'll become more efficient over time. But I want to find a safe product that even with mistakes, if challenges, with errors, we still have the buffer to correct and the buffer to improve. And it's almost like a Tesla, right? We really started with a really expensive car at the beginning before we gradually get into the mass market. And I feel that like cell-cultivated meats or cell-cultivated seafood should follow a similar model where we focus on premium products initially, improve the efficiency, learn how to do it, then over time shift into more large-scale, more bulk products as the technologies mature. Of course, I personally, I believe that by the end of my lifetime, a lot of a portion of the animal protein that people eat will no longer come from a slaughter animal. But we are not there yet. And we really should focus on getting the first step right before we try to save the world. Because as I always put to people, right, only financially viable business can be sustainable. There isn't a sustainable business that's not financially viable. And we need to focus on financial viability, especially in this climate where I think investors are expecting a return and expecting that you break even. And investors definitely don't want to subsidize people's lunch and dinner
Allan,
at the restaurant.
Can we just get back to the product itself? I mean, I am very interested to discuss caviar as a kind of cultivated product. So because most companies, I suppose, are producing the animal itself rather than the eggs which come from the animal. So does that make it more difficult or more straightforward? Because as far as I see it, each caviar is one cell. Am I looking at that correctly? So or at least so is it more or less complicated to produce caviar than it is to produce the fish flesh itself, I suppose, is the question.
Cool. So you're correct, right? If you have chicken egg this morning, or you have a fish roll this morning or last evening, you ate one cell, right? One chicken egg is one cell. One fish egg is also one cell.
Right.
Cell culture food by cell, right? So when we culture, we literally cell, as the name suggests, we're cell culturing. So we're making it cell by cell individually. For your audience who have a PhD in science, they will know that like muscles are formed by myotubes, but essentially like muscle fibers are multicellular structure. And if you look at a salmon fillets or something, then you know that the muscles and the fat like interlink with each other. Inside a piece of meat in a natural animal, there'll be blood vessels to supply oxygens and nutrients to the flesh. And of course, like just like you and me and the animal, they go to the gym, right? We run on a treadmill or something. They run away from predators. Then these muscles are exercised and the texture improve, of course, as the muscles exercise and so on. We can't really do that in a bioreactor, not that I know of anyway, in a fast and efficient way. Whereas when we make one cell or one fish egg cell, we really kind of just make one roll. Of course, now there has been existing literature, at least for sturgeon, that people have been able to culture ovarian tissues, and that there have been studies to grow these eggs into more to grow these eggs and to divide them and to culture them into something that is perhaps what we will call roll in the natural sense. Now, just to make it clear, there's a lot of IP and there's a lot of innovation still needed. A lot of scientific R&D is still needed to make what we call roll or caviar on our dinner plates. Right? That there has been no one who culture a genuine egg and form it into a roll and push it into a plate and for someone to push it into the mouth. What I've seen in the market right now is primarily what I call alternative. So it may not be a genuine egg, it may not be fish at all, it might be like vegan roll or whatever. So there has no one has done that yet. But
okay. So do you, I mean, are you confident
Yeah.
that you will be able to do that? That you will, you know, that you can put the science together to deliver the roe?
We're confident that we are a good team to try. And the reason being is that we have experts in seafoods, we have experts in fish cell culture and fish cell research, and we have experts who have experience in commercializing cultivated meats. The science of culturing eggs is already there. It was done mostly for research purposes, either for ecology or for other type of biotechnologies. But there has never been like people trying to do it for food. And our barrier is to make it cost efficient, scalable, and safe, so that not only we can produce it efficiently, but also to recreate the organoleptic experience, so that this is something that we crave and we truly enjoy.
So what are the I know that these questions are perhaps a little bit science-based, and you haven't got your scientist here. So if you don't know, that's fine. But you know, what are the barriers to creating the roe? What are the problems? Do you I mean, are you able to answer that question, or shall we move on?
I try to describe it in general terms.
Okay.
There are a couple of issues that we need to focus on. First, we need to find the right animals, and I've been working in the cultivated seafood for some time. The idea that you get a fish or get an aquatic animal from the supermarkets or from the wet market or fresh off the boat seems ideal from a layman's sense, but there are a lot of issues. First of all, how do you know that animal is what it is? Now that, I mean, I've been working in the fish sector for over a decade. I cannot identify every fish in the supermarket, just to put it out there. Okay, so that's one issue. And the other issue is you don't know the history of that fish. Was it sick? Was it healthy? Was animal welfare processes observed? Ethical standards observed when the animal was slaughtered? You perhaps don't have records. You can't really ask the person at the checkout to describe how the fish was produced to you, right? I mean, that's to my knowledge. So what we try to do is first we focus on the provenance of the animal. So we go back to the farm, we ask the breeder, we ask the records, like where the fish came from, how did you farm the fish, you know, what was the fish eating, and so on and so forth. These are standard procedures that we would do for a supermarket in the US as well, right? When we farm fish. So records of everything. So that's number one. Number two is you need to extract the right cell. Now, like, I don't want to get into deep dive into the science here, but the cells are small, right? You can see them under the microscope, and the fish is huge. So where do you find the right cell for the right purpose? And then, of course, then there is the process of making the cell dividable in suspension and scalable. So
surely the cell to make roe has to come from the roe itself rather than from the fish itself. Or am I wrong about that?
I would describe it like this. I would say that every fish, every female fish at least, have roles that have future roles to be in the body, obviously, because it does come from the fish. And we try to extract those future roles to be. And I don't want to get into the biology nuance here, but
I understand.
Essentially,
I understand broadly what you mean.
You don't want to pick up the roe from the water. First of all, that those roes would likely be contaminated because you know it's in the environment. And secondly, to my knowledge, there's no easy way to divide those roes once they are like pushed out of the body. So like we want the cell culture, right? So we want them to be dividing rapidly. And there is some IP in how to find the right cell in the fish, and it may sound more complicated than what first appeared to, at least to me initially when I founded the company. Okay.
Well, let's I mean, yes, I have a broad understanding, so let's move on. So you come from a seafood kind of sales background. You told me that your family have been selling seafood for how long? For like a couple of generations, is it? Or for
so let me maybe it's a good chance to tell my story here. I'm from Hong Kong originally. I grew up studying partly in Hong Kong and partly in the UK and partly in Canada. And my degree was in biology. But then I was very, very confused about what I wanted to do next. And as most kids in Hong Kong, when you don't know what to do, you go and do finance. So I went into investment banking, and I started working as first in the back office and later as an investment banker in the city. Now, I really joined the industry at the wrong time, because in the first months that I joined, Lehman Brothers collapsed. And I always tell people it's not because of me. So Lehman Brothers collapsed, and the job market was extraordinarily difficult, as you can imagine. And I moved back to Asia and continued doing investment banking. In investment banking, I specialize in food. In food, I specialize in seafood. And in seafood, I specialize in fish. Now, my personal family, my family does not farm fish, but I've served multiple families farming pigs, fish, and other animals as well. And unlike most other investment banker or M&A advisors, we work with fairly early stage companies, and we go into the farms and the factories to work with them and solve operational issues that need to be solved for the business to be viable as an M&A target. So I gun up every day. I wear the coats. I can smell the factory when I go there, and by just being in the factory, smelling it, I kind of know what kind of fish or shrimp or meat they're making already, right? Because I've been there for so long. And we don't only do fish factory. We do farms. We do feed mills. We work in all sorts of operations. And what I remember and what I learned from all this is that like farming is no easy feat. Number two, the farmers really love the animals and they care for them and they form an emotional bond with them. And this also applies to me, because every time I walk across the farm and I see these land animals being lined up or being prepped for slaughter, the closer they get to the slaughtering line, the more stressed they are, the more fidgety they become. And as the moment that they're killed or the moment that they get slaughtered, I can look into their eyes, and their eyes were filled with fear. And then I look into my eyes were filled with sadness. Now, our systems produce foods for millions of families around the world. We create dignified employment for tens of thousands of people. And they really truly put food on the table for a lot of families who couldn't otherwise afford a healthy, nutritious source of proteins. So there is the animal cost, but there is also the economic benefits that food industry brings. And I remember that during COVID, right, that there was substantial disruption in the supply chain, and like supermarkets were running out of food. And as food producer, when we promise like a supermarket to deliver food, we'll always deliver it at the original price, subject to logistics, what logistics allow, right? Because there was no ships and so on. But we'll try to always deliver the food on time to the best that we can at the price that we promise.
So are you working in
We've been able to do that.
So are you working in that industry now, alongside the work you're doing with cultivated meat? Are you still working with fisheries and fish farming organizations?
Not really. I mean, we have investors who come from fish farming and fish factory operations. Okay. So at Marinas Bio, we update our investors and provide insights to them. But what I want to say is this, is that we work closely with the seafood sector to grow the seafood pie together. And that we work with both sturgeon farmers and other farmers of other aquatic species to enable them to be more sustainable, to be kinder to the animals, and to extract our biotechnology know-how to help them. And I honestly believe that the food system, that our food story in the future is diverse. There isn't one plant, one cell culture technology, or one animal that can feed everybody. It has never been, by the way. So that everybody can contribute to that food story, and we can together make a kinder, a more sustainable future for the next generation.
Yeah, well, I'm all for that. That's sort of the purpose of these podcasts, I suppose, is to try and grow that community and kind of act in some way as a conduit, perhaps, you know, helping to spread the information. So it's I suppose the fisheries, the fish farms are investing in their own future because they perhaps see cultivated seafood as something that will replace the fish farms, and so clearly they you know they need to kind of look ahead. So would you say that you are getting significant investment from the fish farms and from the fisheries?
We have a diversified investor base from a wide range of investors, and most of the early investors were the ones that have invested in my previous alternative food startup that I work for and make a decent return from the previous deals. And we also work with other people that from my investment banking days where they were former clients and they have also generated returns from those transactions.
Right.
I want to emphasize that investors do want returns, and it is our job as CEOs to do our best to deliver returns. And I will stress that we look at it from that lens. But to your earlier comment that seafood companies are investing in their own future, I totally agree with that. But we're also investing in a kinder future for the animals, for the equity and respect that they deserve, because they make the ultimate sacrifice for us to create wealth and to put food on the table for us.
Yeah. So with your caviar, which countries are you hoping to launch the caviar into?
We will focus on countries that have existing regulatory approval. The goal is to learn from the first movers who spend significant investments and effort in working with regulators to establish precedents and procedures, so that as second mover we can become more efficient and we don't have to. We are helped by these countries these startups who will make the initial efforts. So to date, there are 2 countries, to my knowledge, that have approved the cultivated meat, being the United States and Singapore. And of course, we are quite deeply connected to ecosystems in both countries. And we look forward to working with regulators in the future to launch products in these countries, as well as other countries as cultivated meat being approved across the world.
So seafood hasn't been approved in either of those countries yet, has it?
No. So it's interesting. So I'm not a legal expert, but I'll tell you what I know, and I want to caveat that. But in the US, for majority of seafood is actually processed or under the jurisdiction of the FDA. So except for 1 or 2 types of seafoods, that almost all seafood is under the FDA, whereas in the case of cultured chicken, for example, I understand that they had to engage both FDA and USDA to get it into the market. Now, as you know, startups are short on cash, short on time, and short on humans. So the fewer regulatory hurdles that you have is perhaps the easier. And we also like the fact that cultural roe is just 1 type of cell. The only cell that we are eating is egg cells, right? Except some under some very exceptional circumstances, you can eat egg cells on its own as food. Whereas in a piece of meat, you have the muscle cells, the fat cells, and potentially the connective tissue cells that you need to either hybrid or you need to co-culture them or somehow have them linked together. So from a regulatory perspective, that individual cell type as food is much easier. And as humans, we eat 1 individual cell types for millennia, and that's the egg cells.
Yeah.
For Singapore, there's no dual agency structure for Singapore. So Singapore is also easier in that sense. It's all regulated by the Singapore Food Agency. So of course, we had previous communication for in my career in the food industry.
So you must be watching other companies like Blue Nalu and Umami and Blue, and to see which of those are going to get regulatory approval first. Have you any insider information? Have you any idea, what might happen next with those companies?
I would say that actually I'm friends and with founders and employees of some of these companies that you mentioned, and I would let them do their own announcement by themselves. But what I can say is that there are a lot of companies eyeing for regulatory approval in the cultivated seafood space. So I'm confident that one or more of them will obtain approval sooner than later. As to when, I want to break the element of surprise. I think that they should control that narratives. What I would say is this though, there is a lot of companies now trying to create their own brands in cultivated meat, and then that's super amazing. But we as an industry or we as individual startups need to determine whether we're a technology company or a brand company, because the investors are different, the returns are different, and the requirements are different. As someone been in the seafood industry for quite some time, I can tell you that investing in brands does not always generate the return that you seek. Now, let me ask you, or let me remind everybody that when you eat a piece of salmon or when you eat a piece of tuna at your favorite restaurant, did they tell you what brand of tuna or what brand of salmon did they come from? Probably not, right? This also applies to like chicken, pork, and beef and shrimp and all other type of meat as well. So that is that case. Whereas like sturgeon or roe, they tend to tell a story. So these are like, oh, we come from that farm, you come from that country, and they're bred in certain ways. So the more expensive the meat or the animal protein is, the easier it is to tell a brand story. But the brand story almost come from the animal, but not from like a ketchup brand or a tea brand or whatever. So that we need to take that into account. One thing that the industry have done really well is having industry standardization brands. So we call them certification in the seafood industry. So for the listeners who are not seafood buyers, like the two big well-known brands are ASC or Aquaculture Stewardship Councils. There's an equivalent for wild-caught seafood called MSC, and then there's BAP primarily for the US. So they are like big name certifications that the industry had kind of agreed and subscribed to. And as the cultivated seafood industry mature, I'm hoping that we can find some kind of certification to demonstrate that A, the animal is GMO or otherwise, B, has the animal been treated fairly or well in the process where the cells are extracted, and thirdly, like is the process safe? Has any kind of unsafe or any kind of only the best or the most, only the chemicals and ingredients that were certified were used, and that kind of standards. And I think that as the industry matures, investing dollar to create customer confidence as an industry together is much better return for all investors than each company issuing competing brands that have very similar brand message. But of course, like the industry is still very new. Neither you or me know what will happen, so we'll watch, and I look forward with eager enthusiasm that we will create a sustainable market acceptance for consumers around the world.
Yeah, so I mean that was you've sort of just answered a question that I wanted to ask you, and so I was going to ask you whether you think cultivated meat and fish is a good investment to make.
That's like, is any stock a good investment? Yeah. I don't want to be a stockbroker, but
no, but you are sort of, aren't you? So
I'm a stockbroker, am I? So let me answer it this way. In my view, I mean, I have been involved in investments in of course my own company, but also other companies as well in this space. I would say this, right? One is that there has been a hype that historically I've heard some founders talking about that everyone's going to culture their own meat or whatever it is that they want to culture in their own kitchen. I mean, let's face it, do you grow your own fish or your own shrimp or your own oyster in your kitchen? You don't. Why? Because we have a day job, right? We want to go to work and come back and don't have to worry about it. Like supermarket is a pretty good choice for us, right? I mean, let's just face it like as is. So that the idea that people will culture their own food, I think is no longer here.
I
And
haven't
never mind
heard that. I haven't heard that particular idea that we will be able to sort of culture our own fish and meat. I think it's a little bit more complicated for the average person to sort of do that in their kitchen.
Exactly. So, and then the idea that there are a lot of like micro breweries of people culturing their own food in certain jurisdiction when there's food staff, that is possible. So like Singapore, for example, is going along that route because there's food security issues. Whereas like in countries that are net food exporter, like the US, I mean, they're mostly focused on improving the technology and creating a lowering costs and improving safety. And that normally means concentrating things, right? So like in pig farm and pig factories, we don't farm one pig in every town. That's just a biosecurity nightmare. We want to group them together in one location to do all the clean rooms and all those things, right? So that's number one. I would say that if you want to invest in cultivated meat, and I of course I support you to do that and support your listeners to do that, but you should do your due diligence, right? Work with the founders, work with the chief scientific officer to understand whether the science is viable. Ask someone else who are in this industry to check the reputation and the scientific capability of the startups. And in my view, like in cultivated meat, at least my view is that we are investing in technology. We're not investing in brands. The reason why is that the brand will not work unless the technology works. And if the technology works, we can always do the brand later. And I would say that I've been selling seafood or been involved in the seafood industry for over 10 years. The brand is important, but the company is even more important. So knowing what brand you buy it from is not as important as knowing which factory produces it. And the brand is in the factory, it's in the corporate. And that's really, really important to seafood buyers that exist today. Yeah. So that I think that if you're investing in, especially in cultivated seafood, you need to talk to a seafood buyer to understand like what is their customer journey, what's their purchasing behavior, and then ask yourself whether the science and the business actually match. And this is the challenge that we have, right? Like for example, like hybrid food. Now, don't get me wrong, hybrid food is a really good way to improve the technology and to lower costs. But we have been making, I'm Chinese, right? I'm Cantonese Chinese. I've been eating fishball since like my memory allowed, since I have my memory, right? So and fishball has always been a hybrid food. So that we make fish meat and we have plant-based hybrid and we mix them together. We form fishball and we put them in our noodle and we slurp away and we're very happy. I still very much enjoy fishball and it's a hybrid product. And of course, like they can decrease costs. But the issue for hybrid product is if you go into a fish factory or a fishball factory like the one that I work in, then you know that the fishball is coming from fish waste that we cannot otherwise sell. So that you're really competing with fish producers that have a very, very low marginal cost that they basically cut the fillet and the leftover bits of meats that they cannot form a fillet, they form fish fingers and fish balls. So that if you were to do that, then you need to understand that from a price comparative landscape that the price comparison for the production cost for like the fish carcass or the fish scraps is very, very low for a fish factory because it's a necessary evil in the process of making fish fillets. And that you have to think the cost very, very carefully. And again, that goes back to why we make caviar, because like I always say, caviar is an expensive liquidate part of the animal that animal themselves are not very good at making, but people really, really enjoy. So we want to make things that our biggest competitor is not the meat industry. Our biggest competitor is the animal that we love and we try to save. So we need to be more efficient than the animal. And that's like the only way we can gain a foothold in this system and to be part of a sustainable food story that
well, it makes perfect sense to me that you would concentrate your efforts on a premium product, on one that is already expensive and it's and also where there's no competition, I suppose, because as far as I know, you are the only person I know who's doing caviar. So I mean, it makes perfect sense. I'm interested to know what your views are about other companies. Now, there are lots of companies now that are merging. So once the technology is fixed, is working, then clearly R&D companies will then need to merge with companies who are more used to scaling up. So we've seen this happen a number of times around the world with Celex and Meetable and various other ones where they are sort of joining forces. Is this is this something that you would look to do at some point?
We're happy to entertain collaboration proposals, of course, right? As always, and we do see a number of them that we actively seek to partner with and negotiate and hopefully form something that is bigger than ourselves, right? That's of course true. On the M&A landscape, perhaps I was trained as an M&A banker, so I may be able to say may have some humble observations here. There are two types of M&A right now. There are the M&As where companies with what I would call like not completely mature technologies or technologies that is prior to product market fit in the cultivated industry that are merging and selling, partly because of the difficult fundraising environment, and also partly because that I think there are some technology or some capabilities that are not quite ready for product market fit. And I say that because I've saw a lot of mistakes, especially in cultivated seafoods, where people started with the wrong animals or the wrong procedures and the wrong work, because there was a period, especially during COVID, that a lot of companies really try to please the investors. Oh, we are growing it in bigger bioreactors. Oh, we have X number of cell lines. Now, having X number of cell lines doesn't mean all of those cell lines can reach product market fit. So having more cell lines is not necessarily better. It's better to have one good cell line than 1,000 bad ones. So that's number one. Having big bioreactors or having a pilot factories and so on is of course good, right? You can produce things, assuming the cell line work. Now, I don't have the IP databases for every startup, so I don't know whether individual startup have the right cell lines, but we have seen companies that fail because they build too fast. And unfortunately, I believe there are still some more to come, that they have built too fast before the they build the infrastructure before the biotechnology is ready, so that they get into a catch-22 situation that they don't have enough money to do the R&D, nor they can commercialize using the existing infrastructure. So those companies will probably be sold at a price that is worth to the incoming buyer. There will be, on the other hand, there will be companies that are buying what I call ready-made technologies to commercialize cultivated meat and cultivated seafood. In my view, that is still some way to go, and I can explain why. The biggest seafood companies, the biggest seafood brands in the world now that are in your and in my supermarket and in our fridge, often buy seafood from a third-party manufacturer. So you can think of it as almost like OEM. And I don't want to go into the names and who makes what, because that may, I'll just people can come to me privately. I can point them to the right directions. But different factories, and I worked in the industry before as well, that different factories make food for different brands. And if you're in the seafood buying world, you kind of know which brand and which factories does what for who. Now, if you as a cultivated meat founder and go you pitch to the CEO of this brand, say, hey, take my technology and make food for you, then I think a lot of these founder will see, or this big brands company will secretly ask us actually, we don't make our own seafood, or we buy the seafood from someone else, or we have a packer or manufacturer who does it for us. So why are you as a technology company outsourcing the work back to me, right? As a technology is supposed to save me time and making my life easier, not make my life more efficient. So if my advice to any kind of cultivated meat technologies trying to sell to a big brand is, you have to ask whether you're helping the big brand to make their life easier or make their lives harder. And if you're helping you can help them to make their lives easier, fantastic. If you cannot, then we as an industry need to work harder to do that. Or you can create your own brands and compete directly with them. But there's no there's no shortcut in food, because like it's an honest trade for honest people, and people will always remember you if you sell them the wrong food.
Yes.
And in our industry, like having the reputation, having the long-term relationship is very, very valuable for us. So just like how I remind myself every day, we need to wake up earlier, work harder, and do not rest until we get it done.
Okay. I'm just gonna so last question. Apart from your own products and your own company, which cellular agriculture companies do you admire most that are out there at the moment?
What I can tell you is, I will say this. I will say that I increasingly I admire more and more of them as I learn more and more from them. The problem, as you know, is that I work for one, so my ability to learn from others is somewhat more limited than you. And I'm also relying on the news and on public media to understand this industry. And so I don't know how to answer that question, knowing so little that I know. But I would say that the really early players that started this industry, I think that like the founders have an amazing vision that, you know, even now that I look back, when they were founded this company, I was still, you know, sleeping in the meat factory, and I heard about it. I thought it was crazy. So like, and of course, and now I'm wearing the CEO hat. So like, I find that vision to be amazing, and I really admire that. And I want to say that for all those founders who founded the company, you know, 5-10 years ago, I kudos to you. Like you taught the industry something, like for the whole animal protein industry, that we can do better, we will do better by using technologies and using human ingenuity to create a kinder future for the animals that are under our care.
I suppose one of the oldest companies is the Dutch one.
Yes. So like, I think
Mosa meat, is that?
Yeah. So like, okay, I'm not a very good historian, so I need to ask someone who is more expert. But the gentleman who started making the burger on, I believe, was Dutch television, was Mark Pols, and he is of course the founder of Mosa.
Yeah.
But like there are a lot of other companies who are doing this too. So, and of course, like he is a thought leader and an industry leader in this space. I don't have a lot of knowledge about the IP of Mosa, so I don't want to come in and get it wrong, because that.
Apparently, Mosa meat IP is the most public, because Mosa meat started as a PhD project. They have to publish all of their papers, which means that their IP is public, whereas lots of the other companies, it's all strictly confidential, which I think is interesting. So Allan, anyway, thank you for answering the questions. It's been great talking to you, and let's stay in touch. I want to be one of the first to try your caviar when it's ready.
Yeah, I'll be sure. For sure, we'll be sure to let you know when.
Send me an invitation. Why not?
Yeah, we're secretly sneak into the lab in the middle of the night to to experience it. Like, no, thank you very much for your time, and I really appreciate it. Like I said, like our industry needs to work together more and compete less, because literally we are the really small fish in the pond, and we still have way to go before we become a big fish in this industry, in the fish industry. And even the big fish are very collegiate, and they work together to create a sustainable seafood industry. And we should just take a lead from that, knowing that